So this is my running record case study presentation. So some of the student's strengths, while reading the first three passages, which were at the levels T, U, and V, the student read at a very reasonable pace. Just for a little bit of background, the student was in 5th grade, but read a little bit below her grade level, so more of so at a 4th grade reading level. For the most part, she was able to decode any words that she didn't initially recognize by either sounding them out or using context clues, which are both strategies that she mentioned in the student interview that she tends to use in the classroom and has been taught by her teacher. So the student did an excellent job of using the visual cueing system when she did opt to make a substitution for a word that she didn't know, which means that she's definitely paying close attention to the letters that a word is composed of in order to try and decode an unknown word the best she can. The student did not make any repetition or reversal miscues while reading any of the passages, and only during the level U passage did she include one insertion. She achieved her goal of not skipping over unknown words as she often usually does. This was something that she also mentioned during the student interview. And this reflected in her lack of omissions while reading. So she only had 2 omissions for each of the U, V, and W level passages. The student is very skilled at retelling the summary and details of a nonfiction passage with accuracy, and her word identification and comprehension performance determined that the levels T, U, and V were at her independent level. So some of her areas of improvement. By the time that I reached the 4th passage, which was level W, she definitely appeared to lose some motivation. The circumstances weren't exactly ideal. There were other students that were also being tested on their running record in the same room and at the same time as her. So I think that was definitely distracting. And also the amount of passages that she had to read, because she kept reaching her independent level and I kept having to test her higher. I think she was just beginning to get a little bit frustrated and losing motivation. So I definitely think that her stamina could be improved on regardless of those circumstances. The student also needs to work on using the meaning and structural cueing systems to help her decode unknown words when she's making a substitution, instead of almost always relying on the visual cueing system. So an example of this is when she said zipped instead of the word zapped, which definitely didn't make sense in the context of the passage, which means that she wasn't using the meaning cueing system. And she also said, nobody picked that I would become an astronaut instead of nobody predicted that I would become an astronaut, which is not structurally correct in this sentence and shows that she isn't using the structural cueing system. She's really only using the visual cueing system. So while reading the passages, especially at level W, which is the last one that she read, the student relied way too heavily on my help with pronouncing unknown words for her. So I think she definitely needs to work on finding more ways to decode these words on her own. She also needs to start monitoring her own comprehension while reading more often. Throughout the 4 passages, she only made 1 self-correction. So I definitely think that that's something that she should work on. When retelling the key elements of a passage, the student needs more practice with understanding important vocabulary, identifying the main idea, and recalling the sequence of events, setting, characters, problem, and resolution of a passage. She did much better with retelling the key elements of a nonfiction passage than a fiction passage. So I think if she has more work with working on her comprehension for fiction passages, she will definitely be in a better position to do well on a future running record. So some of my improvement recommendations, word analysis activities, so breaking down large unknown words into parts based on their affixes, roots, and bases. So having the student identify the root word, then the prefix, then the suffix, and then pronouncing each of those individually before pronouncing the word as a whole is much less overwhelming than looking at a large word and trying to pronounce it all at once. So this would help with the student's accuracy skills and might prevent her from making less substitutions in the future. Also interactive word walls, so on the outside of a card, writing a vocabulary word that the student might be struggling with or a word that she might come across in a text in the future. On the inside, writing its definition and a sample sentence. and then displaying these cards on a wall in the classroom for the student to refer to. This would definitely help to build the student's vocabulary, which would help her to identify words more easily on her own without the use of teacher pronunciations, which she did rely pretty heavily on. And then the request or reciprocal questioning procedure. So placing the student with a partner, and then as they read the text together, having them pause throughout to ask each other questions. This would help the student with retelling key elements of a story for comprehension because she's being asked to stop and think about what she's reading while she's reading. And this will help her prove that she is gaining a proper understanding of the important aspects of a text. And I think that generally working with a partner at a similar reading level could definitely be more helpful than trying to work on comprehension on your own sometimes. So these are some samples of strengths that she exhibited throughout the running record. During the student interview, the student said that in order to become a better reader, she wanted to stop skipping over words as often. And so, as shown in this photo of the running record of the level T passage, the student did not make any omissions, which means that she achieved her goal on this particular reading passage, which was really exciting for me to see as a proctor. And she also did very well with retelling the key elements of a nonfiction passage. So as shown here, she was able to identify the summary, the details, and the vocabulary with accuracy at the highest level and with only medium prompting. She also did well with identifying the main idea, but not as strongly as she did with the other key elements. So some samples of areas of improvement. Primarily during the last passage that she read, which was level W, the student relied too heavily on teacher pronunciations for unknown words. As shown in this photo, the student asked for my help with pronouncing words 10 different times, which is definitely a lot and is something that she could work on, trying to decode unknown words on her own rather than asking for them to be pronounced for her. So also for the level W passage, the student had a difficult time retelling the key elements. She needs to work on recalling the sequence of events, the setting, the problem, and the resolution. As you can see, she only primarily achieved a level 1 for those, some of them 0, and only the character she received a 2 on. So despite the fact that I gave a high level of prompting for this, she still struggled to retell the majority of the elements from the passage. So that's definitely something that she needs to work on. And then these are I just used the textbook for the improvement recommendations, and that was all.